We have the Foreign Affairs Minister, Melanie Joly, coming up on the program. First, though, we're going to go to Dick Pound, a member of the International Olympic Committee, and he is in Montreal. Mr. Pound, good to have you on the program. You have said that diplomatic boycotts won't sway Chinese policies. If Canada's goal here is to send a message, what do you think the Chinese will hear?
Well, I think there's two interesting developments here. One is that the Canadian government has moved away from the Moscow boycott syndrome, where only the athletes paid the price of the political decision, to one that separates the politics from the sport, and I think that's a good evolution. Now, the boycott, I think is interesting. A, that it's occurring, and B, that governments realize that Chinese government policies have to be addressed by other governments, not by athletes and non-politicians. So this is a start of getting together to say, look, we have serious issues on this score, and we need to open a dialogue that's going to lead to meaningful resolution. And governments know how to send those kinds of messages, and they know when they receive them that they've received them. So this is a start of something that is not going to be resolved by the time of the Beijing Games, but it's an indication that a growing number of countries around the world are really quite upset with China on many respects, not just human rights, but certainly including human rights, and that there's going to have to be something done about it.
You know, let me talk to you about that, because there is, of course, the decision to place the games there in the first place. Now, I know that's not your decision, but you've been with the organization for a very long time, and you've seen where other Olympic Games have been hosted. And in this case, China is a fascinating country that has many exciting things going on, and also many horrible things, whether it is hostage diplomacy that our own David Cochrane was just speaking about in reference to the two Michaels, or 2 million Uyghurs alleged to be in conditions that are akin to, by some accounts, a concentration camp. And yet the IOC has made a decision to, place the games in a country that stands to bolster its image by hosting games. This is an ongoing issue for the IOC. Do you see that there is a recognition in the organization of the problem here?
For sure. I mean, in the old system of allocating the games, it was basically, we said there'll be games in 2022, who's interested in hosting them? And then we would work through the candidates that pursued their interest. As it's happened because of the referenda in mostly in Western Europe, a lot of them fell off the table, and we ended up in this competition with Kazakhstan and China. And what was very interesting, and if you were advising the Chinese government, you would say, listen, we came within 4 votes of losing this to Kazakhstan. Houston, we have a problem here, and we're going to have to deal with it. But that said, the other thing we've done now is change the whole site selection process to turn it from a bid against certain criteria into a discussion. What do you need to make this happen successfully in your country? Here's what we need to make the Olympic Games happen, and let's work through a lot of these issues that would not otherwise be given the right amount of attention in a purely electoral process.
Do you think Beijing could still win the games?
Off some of these problems.
Do you think Beijing could still win could Beijing still win the games? You say things have changed, but could Beijing still win the games?
Well, I think it would be much tougher today than it was 7 years ago. That kind of discussion did not occur, and probably in those days could not have occurred. But now that the sort of the new selection process is in place, if you're interested in hosting, you're going to have to deal with a whole bunch of issues that previously were not on the table.
We began this conversation by you talking about the athletes and how these games are for the athletes and it's for competition, and there are other issues, but that they are separate from the athletes. One of the athletes who's been to the Olympics and someone you've spoken about recently, Peng Shuai, Chinese tennis player, an Olympic champion, and many people around the world know the story of what happened with her. She posted on social media accounts alleging that she had been raped by a high-profile official in the Chinese Communist Party. And then she sort of disappeared, and only to reappear after concerns about her well-being. And she reappeared in a conversation with the IOC president. And there have been still quite a few concerns about whether that entire conversation was staged or whether there were Chinese officials in the room with her making sure that she stayed on message. That has been the analysis of some people. I know you've spoken about this. Do you have concerns about her well-being?
Do I? Yeah, of course. Until we have a face-to-face meeting live, it's going to be, there'll always be questions. On the other hand, we did speak with her, and the three people from the IOC on the call were convinced that she was healthy and not under confinement or anything like that. But it's not the same as being live. And on the other hand, we're the only ones that have spoken with her. So nobody else who's speculating about what might happen or could happen or did happen has any basis for that.
Isn't it a cause for suspicion that nobody else has spoken with her?
Not necessarily. She may not have wished to speak with anyone else. I mean, in our case, we had the natural link. This is an Olympian, a three-time Olympian, mm-hmm. and we're an Olympic committee, and we are concerned about her health and well-being, and that's been our entire process: is reach out, establish a contact, grow some confidence and trust. It's very hard when you don't know the three people that are on the call to start talking about sexual harassment. So you need to make her understand that our concern is her welfare and working through this process. It's not going to be done in a couple of 30-minute video calls. Mm-hmm. In our country, in almost any country, a sexual harassment complaint or suit takes years to get resolved. So this is an issue that is going to survive the games in a couple of months. It's not going to go away. And it does involve an Olympic athlete who's made a complaint of harassment. And somehow or other, that's going to have to be dealt with to the satisfaction of the IOC and Peng Shuai herself and the Chinese authorities. The problem is the only government that has any power to do anything in the circumstances is the Chinese government.
Yeah, and there's no indication they're investigating. I mean, nobody said at all that literally there was this social media post and then it was gone, and now it's like it's the subject that cannot be broached.
Well, it has been broached, and it will be broached, and I think that's an issue that the Chinese are going to have to come to grips with, because are they going to be mainstream in the sense that? Sorry, somebody else is trying to get up.
Well,
sorry, go ahead.
I was just going to say we're out of time with you, Mr. Pound, but we certainly appreciate it, and I hear what you're getting at there. Thank you.
Okay, anytime.
Thank you. Back to our top story and the decision by the Canadian government today to not send government officials to the Beijing Games. It is a diplomatic boycott. And we're bringing in Melanie Joly, the Minister of Foreign Affairs, who's in the House of Commons foyer. Madame Joly, Minister Joly, very good to have you on the program. Thank you very much for being here. Look, you've said that Canada is taking a leadership position on this, and yet we seem to be leading behind a bunch of our allies who made this decision before us, at least publicly, and we seem to be coming out just as they're running through the finish line. What's the timeline here? Why is it we are where we are?
Well, first and foremost, we've been talking about this issue at the international level for months at this point. But I will want, of course, to remind people watching us that Australia took their decision on December 8th, today. The UK took their decision on December 8th. We took our decision on December 8th. So I think because of the fact that we live in a world where communication never stops, we took our decision through different time zones on the same day.
So are you saying it was a coordinated action?
Well, I've been in contact definitely with my colleague, Minister Payne, in Australia, and my colleague, Minister Trust, also the Foreign Secretary of the UK. I had many conversations with them recently, and I was even with Secretary Trust last week at NATO. So this has been in the works. I had conversation with Secretary Blinken, but we wanted to altogether send a strong message to China, and at the same time, we want to make sure that other countries are also joining this movement that we've created and we've launched, because it is important that China hears from democracies in the world that what is happening in Xinjiang in terms of allegations of human rights violation is extremely important.
You say it's intended to be a serious message, but the Chinese have essentially dismissed countries that have taken this position of a diplomatic boycott and said things akin to "you weren't invited" or "we don't care." And obviously, I'm very much paraphrasing on that. So if this is a serious message, why not also implement policies that would put pressure on Beijing and target the specific abuses you're talking about in Xinjiang, and/or demand transparency?
Well, we're doing both, David. Through the UN Human Rights Council, we've tabled a resolution asking for an independent and transparent investigation to go to Xinjiang and get the information, and also a clear access, unfettered access. There's now more than 45 countries that have supported Canada's resolution. We will continue to play that role through multilateral organizations, but also through this coalition of countries that we're creating in the context of the Winter Olympics. And I must say also that it is the Winter Olympics, so not all countries in the world are as strong as Canada when it comes to our Winter Games and Olympics and Paralympics. But the fact that Canada is not participating diplomatically this time is definitely a strong message.
Is Canada in a stronger or safer position now to take this kind of a stand now that the two Michaels have been released? Well,
I was with the two Michaels earlier today. I had the chance to meet with them, and obviously for the past 3 years, while they were illegally and unjustifiably detained, it was the utmost priority of our government. And so we wanted to make sure that we were continuing our conversation with the Chinese government while abiding by the rule of law and having a strong stance here at home. That's why we worked on also creating a lot of pressure on China by working on this new arbitrary detention convention, which garnered a lot of support from many countries around the world. So obviously we did it many ways through bilateral discussions with China, with the US, with many countries. But at the same time, obviously things have changed since they're back.
Now that they are back, and as you say, you've met with them, did you speak to them about this diplomatic boycott? And if so, what was their response?
Yes, I did. And of course, we want to make sure to continue to advocate their case, because there are certain issues that have not been settled yet. But it is important also that Canadians and people around the world understand that there is a rise of authoritarianism right now, and that we're in a fight to make sure that democracies are able to push back on this increase of authoritarianism. And clearly, we need to take stock of the influence of China, and we need to make sure that we're smart and strategic about it.
What are the issues with the two Michaels that your government is trying to resolve?
Of course, the two Michaels are on bail right now, according to the criminal law in China. And so we want to make sure that we work that out with the Chinese government. It will be a priority.
You mean, and I don't want to put words in your mouth, but are you essentially saying you want that legal process halted?
Of course, we want to make sure that the case is completely resolved. That's really a priority.
How are they doing?
They're fine. They're fine. But you and I and people watching, I think, don't necessarily understand how much it's been difficult. So they're on their own journey, and we'll continue to support them.
Just back to this decision on the diplomatic boycott, Canada, and I certainly don't have to tell you, is so dependent on China, both for imports and exports. There are businesses in this country that exist on the business of Chinese companies, and there are an awful lot of Chinese products and services that are brought into this country and purchased by Canadians. Given that enmeshed and giant financial economic relationship, how do you send a message that exists in the same space that there is such enormous level of cooperation and economic agreement?
Well, that's why we can take a strong stance on human rights. But at the same time, we know that we have a very strong trading relationship, which has an impact on farmers in Saskatchewan and Alberta, on fishers in the Atlantic, on entrepreneurs in Ontario and Quebec and BC. So, of course, we have to be strategic. We need to make sure that there's no economic coercion. That's very important. And that's why we continue to engage with the Chinese government. And also, China knows that we're an important market for them too. They need many of the products and services that we sell to them. And so this is why it is a complex and multifaceted relationship, but Canadians expect us as a government to navigate it very strategically.
I want to ask you about Huawei. Canada is now the only member of the Five Eyes Alliance not to have banned Huawei equipment in our 5G system. When will your government announce its decision?
I know the Minister of Innovation is looking into the issue, and of course he will take a decision in due course. But obviously we always have in mind the national security interest of the nation.
So I'm going to pick on you just for due course, only because I've heard it over and over. Is there a sense that it's sooner than due course, than perhaps, say, this week?
I'm not in the position to give you a time frame right now, but what we know is it is important to take a decision, and we will take it timely.
Okay. Minister Joly, thank you very much for taking some time with us this afternoon. We do appreciate it.
It's a pleasure. Have a great day.
Hi, I'm Vashi Capellos, host of Power in Politics. See more of our show by subscribing to the CBC News channel or click the link for another video.